They've been searching for capacity in Ohio and Kentucky, 30 of those 75 times. It's clear that they have a need for capacity in those two areas, right? And so we can arm sales teams with a lot of that data, right? And we know that they were filtering for dry van and they were filtering for full truckload. Maybe the biggest objection for a sales team, for a carrier, or for a brokerage for that matter, is, hey, we're not adding transportation partners. We're not adding logistics partners right now. Well, with this intent data, you can know who is actually adding transportation partners or who has a problem that they're trying to solve, right? And so timing is always of the essence. And if you can hit them when they need it, that's a big leg up there. And
I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Sales-CRM. If you haven't heard about Sales-CRM, they've been a sponsor of ours for about 4.5 months now, and they are honestly the premier CRM for freight brokers and sales agent teams. It's pretty unique to have a specific product for freight brokers that can house all of your follow-ups, all your shipper prospecting. I know when I was a broker, I did have a hard time, following up and being able to kind of manage my leads through some of those traditional CRM platforms. So when I heard about Sales-CRM, Josh showed it to me probably over a year ago, and I've been a big advocate for what they're doing since then, and that's why they're a sponsor of ours, and I just want to thank them again for being a sponsor. If you guys haven't checked them out, make sure you guys do. Links in the description, but you can also check them out, sales-crm.com. You can try it free for 14 days. Go there, check it out. No credit card needed. Welcome to the ThinkFreight podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Werdine, and we have a familiar face back on the show, Rob Light. He's the founder at CarrierSource. Rob, welcome back to the show. I'm really happy to have you back, man.
Thanks for having me on. It's wonderful to be back.
You guys are doing some really cool stuff, and I wanted to kind of talk about some of the additions you guys have done, but also just all about what's happening in the world of freight and freight tech and carriers and carrier exits and broker exits, and there's just a lot going on. So I figured we could chat about it.
Yeah. There's a never-ending number of storylines that we could talk about, I feel like, and over the last couple of years that have stuck out. But excited to catch up.
Absolutely, man. We were just talking off camera about the Bulls, and we started our last podcast with the Bulls too, so I figured we'd start this one just real quick. Last time we talked, we were really hopeful for a good season, and we were really, really just unfortunate to have a string of injuries and just a lot of really bad play from some of our vets. And we started to see kind of that youth movement start. I think DeMar, like we were saying off camera, probably will walk and probably go to somewhere like LA. And Vucevic now being like the worst shooting big in the league. I mean, we don't really have a good look future. We traded so many draft picks for Vooch and even to get DeMar. So it's good to see us trending youth wise, but we still have all three of our quote unquote vets. So it's kind of tough.
Yeah, my hope is that they go full rebuild. I feel like with Jerry owning the team, he never goes full rebuild.
No.
He likes to be an 8 seed, which is just the worst. But I hope they go for full rebuild. They got to get rid of everybody, clear house, get some assets. I like a little bit of the youth movement, but they need to do more, and I won't be convinced that they'll ever do it until they do. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, same here, man. It's usually with the Reinsdorfs, you have a pretty long leash and a pretty if you can just kind of get into the play-in to the 6th seed, they're happy. They're gonna sell out the arena for 4 or 5 games or for 2 to 3 games and be happy with that. Which I think, as a fan, is just a really crappy way to manage your team. I want championships, Jerry. I want them, and I want them now. We got spoiled in the 90s, even though I wasn't able to see a lot of those, but we got spoiled in the 90s, and I want some new chips, man.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's no worse place than purgatory in the NBA.
And we have found ourselves there for nearly 30 years now.
Yep.
That's sad to say. But hey, you guys have been doing some cool stuff. You've been getting involved with like Broker Carrier Summit, which I think has a really, really awesome mission. I actually just had Dan Lindsay on, and we talked a lot about, forming relationships and just kind of what their overall mission is. I'm glad to see you guys kind of getting more involved in the overall community of building some of these relationships.
Yeah, we attended last fall in Tampa, and then we were there this past spring in Kansas City, and we're going again to Fort Worth in the fall. It's a very unique show. It's very personal. You're there to meet the other side of the industry and make relationships and build true business and personal connections there, which doesn't happen at most events. It feels like, right? You're
Right.
You're often going to conferences to assess technology providers or probably to find shippers, right? Regardless if you're a carrier or a broker, right? That's always the main goal is ROI out of that. But the broker carrier connection is the lifeblood of the industry at this point. And so, kudos to Dan for building an entire operation around connecting those two sides and making sure that they're putting faces to brokers and carriers who are interacting with each other and what often feels like a very faceless relationship.
Yeah, you and I talked a while back kind of about that relationship that's just kind of lacking there. Like it's just the last few years, I think going into COVID really exacerbated the issue with kind of the world just, kind of being more remote for several years and not building those true interpersonal relationships with your carriers. And as we saw kind of the market change really drastically from, we need kind of to help capacity to there was no capacity when COVID was happening and the volumes really spiked. And a lot of carriers, and I think brokers felt this, and I think that a lot of carriers can even attest, a lot of carriers just went to the spot market, whether they had existing contracts or whatever it was. There was too much money in the spot market for a lot of carriers to turn away those opportunities. And I think a lot of, brokers, shippers, whoever it may be, can definitely still feel some of that burn from some of those. But it's also just one of those, it's a perfect storm of what kind of happened. And when you could get capacity and when you could start forming those good relationships on a higher rate, we started to kind of see, those relationships start to be reforged. So I think that, kind of what he's doing over there, what you guys are doing is really important for relationship building. Because if you're not hearing kind of the good, the bad, and really what is happening with some of these carriers, you're not really getting an overall picture of the market and kind of who you're dealing with.
Yeah, I tell this story often, but when we first stood up CarrierSource, we were really concerned it was going to be a dumping ground of negativity, right? And negative reviews. And still to this day, 3 or so years in, 80+% of our reviews are 4 or 5 stars of carriers, right?
Wow.
It's largely positive, and that's probably very indicative of the reality in logistics, right? 80% of the time or so, like things go pretty well. There's not much to complain about. And those other 15, 20% of the time, things happen in this space, and it's hard to control. But for a long time, it was just kind of the negative that got put out there, right? Whether that was freight guard reports or even like a TIA watchdog, right? Which is important for fraud and theft and has since kind of evolved. But it's cool to see that positivity be pushed within the market. And I think too, with the way the market's been for the last 2 years, it's been really important to build strong relationships. If you're a carrier and you have those good, sound relationships, you're going to keep your truck full. You're going to keep moving. You can even argue to push for a little bit of a higher rate, right? If you've been working with somebody for a long time and you've built that relationship. Or if you were savvy enough to be able to go direct to shippers too, right? That obviously was critical to folks, in the last couple of years when spot rates have been so tough to make money off of. So we play a very small role in that. I think Dan is playing a much more intentional role in that, right? So I do agree that it's important.
Yeah, I think with what you guys are doing is it really helps, I think, build a lot of trust between the shipper or the broker and the carrier, because you can really get that full story from other real brokers, other real shippers. You guys are providing verified reviews. So that way, I can, as a broker, as a past broker, really understand, okay, who this is who I'm working with. They've got a lot of good reviews. They've been on time. So it just kind of paints that other picture. When we see, kind of the DAT reviews, we kind of look at those with a grain of salt, because it's just kind of one of those places where if some issue pops up, you just kind of go and weigh into someone and post bad reviews on DAT. And sometimes it's just not even an accurate review. Sometimes you don't even, a carrier doesn't even haul a load for that carrier. They just end up having a bad experience on a phone or whatever it may be, and then leaving a bad review. And then, those reviews are just kind of unfiltered and unchecked. So it's just, you guys having a verified spot to be able to kind of help build some of that trust, I think is really, really good.
Yeah. And what kind of really surprised us over the last year or so is how we realized how big of a shipper audience we have too. We were always very intentional about building a broker audience, and our tool was originally shaped to help carrier sales reps better prospect, find good carriers to work with.
Right.
But because our site's open and free to access, we do really strong organic traffic. And early this year, we were reaching 300,000 plus visits a month.
Wow.
Since then, we've grown to, we did about 425,000 visits last month. And so we don't force people to sign in. So we were trying to figure out exactly, who is this audience? And so we put some tools together to kind of look up by IP address companies that are visiting CarrierSource. And to our surprise, back in February when we stood this up, we had a huge shipper audience, including many enterprise shippers and mid-size small shippers, literally thousands of mid-size and small shippers as well. And it kind of blew us away. But once we started talking with them and trying to better understand, why are you using CarrierSource, right? They need it for the same reasons. They don't have many resources. Honestly, brokers have more resources to vet and find carriers. And so if our reviews can help mid-size, small carriers, right? The big carriers are always going to be involved in direct bids, right? But if we can help mid-size and small carriers stand out to a direct customer audience too, like that's great also, especially in this market, right? We always want to help brokers. But it was kind of a shift in our thinking a little bit. And so we've tried to accommodate that for our carrier audience.
I think that's fantastic, because if you guys are having so many of these shippers already looking at CarrierSource and looking for some of these tools, I think it is showing that, hey, like your platform, what you guys are building, it's kind of doing exactly what you intended to when you left G2, when you decided to build this, is help carriers, help them build that audience, help them get online, help them be seen by more people, be seen by the right people. And, over the past 3 years and even more the last year, it sounds like you guys have really started to get a lot of momentum going to get that proper audience, not just on the brokers, but now with shippers, to say, hey, all the major players are looking for this kind of capacity, these kind of tools, because of, I think, the big shift is just because of double brokering and fraud to begin with. It has really made people look and say, hey, we need really solid reviews, really solid insight into who we're booking, because, we don't want to get burned.
Yeah, there's so much of that. And I mean, as we talked about last time, I think it's very minimal online presence for most carriers, right? Sure, big carriers have a marketing team and a good website, and they put out material and social posts and all that, but most don't, right?
Right.
So shippers are often, hungry for this information on carriers, same way that brokers are, right? And so by just searching for the name of a carrier, we can help them. Their CarrierSource profile will appear high in Google search results. They can find a complete profile of who these companies are, and then read reviews from folks that they've worked with, right? To as we talked about last time, again, get a full understanding of who they are.
Yeah.
But it's been cool to kind of watch the product evolve from that standpoint too, right? It's not just what brokers need right now. It's kind of becoming, okay, if a direct customer is coming here, what do they need to know?
Right.
What tools are useful to them? Um, we've set up some lead forms, right, where folks can come in and they can submit direct RFQs to carriers,
Hmm.
uh, if they want to directly work with them. So we've built out some lead generation tools that have been really fruitful for some carriers, and we've been opening up those to brokers as well recently.
No, that's fantastic. And having those tools, right on board within CarrierSource, I think is fantastic because there is a lot of app fatigue. There is a lot of site fatigue and platform fatigue overall. So just being able to narrow that down into kind of one window in one place, I think is really fantastic. And something, I was kind of unaware of the last time we talked, or maybe this was a feature that wasn't out yet, but it is how carriers can share their capacity right in their profile, which I think is really fantastic. I had actually featured a couple of carriers in our newsletter that have been doing that because it is such a cool feature to be able to say, hey, this isn't on the load board. You don't need a load board subscription to be able to see this carrier's upcoming capacity. And it really does help. And it really makes a carrier stand out to say, hey, we're not just looking for DAT or normal load board opportunities. We're looking, more so for these longer term opportunities. We're looking for good shipping partners, whether that's brokers or carriers, or excuse me, brokers or shippers. And it just makes a lot of sense to what you guys are doing and how you guys are giving some of these carriers those tools that the kind of the mega carriers have to help them really stand out and have that presence.
Yeah, something we do when we go into product meetings and road mapping and new feature brainstorms is we try to put ourselves in the shoes of if we were the lead marketer for a carrier, if we were the marketing team for a carrier, what initiatives would we set up? And we literally go through, email marketing, social marketing, all these different areas. And what kind of led us down the path of the capacity on the profiles was email marketing, right? Well, what email marketing do carriers do? They send out truck lists.
Yeah.
And so we started by sending out just kind of manual email truck lists, right, on behalf of our carrier customers. And then we were like, JB Hunt has their own load board where they put all their capacity forward facing, right? A lot of the big folks do.
Yeah.
And even some mid-sized, smaller folks are savvy enough to put together live Google Sheets that they keep updated, that they link to from their website and things like that, right? So, we just thought, why not include that on there? If we were running marketing for a mid-sized carrier, that's exactly what we do. So we stood that up for them, and I do think it's been useful so far.
Let's dive into kind of what's been new since the last time you've been on. I know you guys have some new features, a couple of new things that I want to dive into. So, what's some of the new things that you guys have going on?
Yeah, so I mentioned some of the lead generation solutions, right, from our shipper audience. So we stood up a lead form on Carrier Profiles, where folks can submit RFQs, whether that's for contract work, spot freight. I can put kind of exactly what they're looking for, how many loads they need filled, and we send that on to our carriers. Additionally, we've started running some intent data solutions as well. I mentioned we've been kind of doing a reverse IP lookup to match companies. So we can tell folks, that Granger has come on CarrierSource 75 times in the last 30 days. They've been searching for capacity in Ohio and Kentucky, 30 of those 75 times. It's clear that they have a need for capacity in those two areas, right? And so we can arm sales teams with a lot of that data, right? And we know that they were filtering for dry van and they were filtering for full truckload. But we can kind of get down in the nitty gritty details, and it's kind of the second step of that lead generation tool, right? If somebody wants to submit to work with you directly, perfect. But if you're going to be doing some outbound sales motions, you might as well know exactly what the prospect needs, right? And
right.
On top of that, when they're looking for new logistics partners. and transportation partners. So you can hit them in a timely fashion. And then the other really big thing that we just rolled out is brokerage profiles, actually. So it's been a long-standing request that we have profiles for brokers, especially from the carrier side, right?
Right.
They've always felt it was only fair that if brokers were reviewing them, that they should be able to review brokers.
Yeah.
Which is a totally fair stance, right?
100%.
And it was always something we were wanting to do, and we finally kind of got the resources and time to get around to it. And so just this past week, we stood up brokerage profiles. They're pretty light right now. It's still early days, right? Only been live for 3 days or so, but we've already started getting a few brokers who've come in and claimed their profile, which is free to do, add in their logos, company descriptions, all that good stuff. We've even gotten a few carriers who've come in and reviewed brokers already as well, too. So it's exciting to see that we haven't done any intentional outreach around it, and folks are finding it and starting to use it.
I absolutely love that. So I want to touch on first your shipper leads or your lead form data. So what I think is interesting, and you can maybe touch on this a little bit more. So this seems like it's better data than kind of maybe a Zoom Info or one of those kind of solutions, because they are actively on CarrierSource looking for that capacity. So if they're actively looking for that capacity, it makes it a lot easier to say, hey, we run these lanes, we run this capacity, how can we potentially help? And that it's kind of more of a warm conversation than a cold conversation. It makes it a little bit easier, it seems like.
Yeah, for sure. I think in a few different ways, right? So from a timing standpoint, I feel like maybe the biggest objection for a sales team, for a carrier, or for a brokerage for that matter, is, hey, we're not adding transportation partners. We're not adding logistics partners right now. Well, with this intent data, you can know who is actually adding transportation partners, or who has a problem that they're trying to solve, right? And so timing is always of the essence. And if you can hit them when they need it, that's a big leg up there, and really good. And then to have the wherewithal to know where your strengths are, especially as a brokerage. Like, where is your carrier network really dense? Like, where do you have good, strong carrier relationships to fill shippers' freight? You can then take that and target it, right, of any shipper who's looking for capacity out of the Atlanta market, right? Or
right.
If you're a carrier as well, and that's where your home base is, and that's where your terminals are, right? You can really target that and use that to your advantage. And so you're right, it is a much warmer lead. It's probably one folks should call on first before they rip through their list that they've pulled from Zoom Info, right? And even from an intent data standpoint, it's much more bottom of the funnel intent data, right? Zoom Info has their intent data. Bombora is a good provider of intent data. There's plenty of others out there that are 6 Sense, right? Demand base. There's plenty of them. They're often a little more high, top of funnel, right? Like they're doing searches all across the internet. Well, if they've gotten to CarrierSource, that means they searched for trucking companies in Quincy, Illinois, right?
Yes.
Or flatbed carriers in Chicago, and they found CarrierSource and they've come in. So from that standpoint, it is a lot more bottom of the funnel. Like they've got a clear problem that they're trying to solve, and if you can take advantage of that, you can get new business in a much easier manner.
It's interesting. I was talking to a couple of broker friends of mine. This might be a month or so ago, Rob, and they were saying we were kind of having a capacity discussion, and they were saying shippers are not looking for brokers. They're not looking for capacity, whether that's vans, carrier capacity through Google. And I pushed back and saying I completely disagree, because there's always going to be some lane, whether that's a new lane, an old lane, some kind of lane that they're having an issue with, that they're going to be looking for some kind of partner on. And it may not be, that may be true for some shippers. They may never have to Google for a transportation partner, but at the same time, if they can go and look at a source like CarrierSource and look at this information, or Google for this capacity and pull up CarrierSource, and then be able to say, oh, like we can just use this instead of Google to look for our capacity. They genuinely are looking for some of this capacity, whether or not they're getting hit up by brokers 15 times a day. They are looking for a specific need. And if you're not coming to them and saying, hey, I can fill a potential Kentucky to whatever lane, I can source capacity out of, XYZ, you're going to have a much easier in conversation with them than saying, hey, XYZ shipper, I can move all of your lanes, or I can move, I have capacity in so many areas. It gets you to such a better place with your shipper or with your prospect to be able to hone in on that conversation with them. So I think that's really fascinating and really a good way to go about it. And I think that, the intent data that you guys are getting from your own site is fascinating.
Yeah, I think there's two things that you mentioned there. Like, people are Googling. Like, we are proof that people are Googling for the names of carriers, for locations of capacity, right? We do more than 15,000 clicks off of Google a day.
Wow.
And we are not the only search traffic out there. I think we have something like 25 million impressions, right, over the last 3 months or so. So people are clearly Googling. It's become, especially for younger generations, a very default action to take. We do it in our consumer life constantly, right? You're always going to Google a product or a service before you buy it, before you use it, before you go to a restaurant. Like, it's just become somewhat of second nature, right? And then the other aspect there too that you mentioned is the personalization. Like, they are getting hounded by 15 brokers a day, right? That are all saying the same thing. They're all saying we provide the highest level of service, right? We don't post loads. They all say the same thing. But the way to stand out amongst that noise is to personalize your outreach, right? And so if you know exactly what their problem is, and you say, hey, I'm ABC Brokerage, we specialize in outbound, Houston. We have very strong carrier relationships there, and that's where they were looking, right? You're going to stand out amongst that noise, and you're going to get their attention in a much better way.
Yeah, you are. You're gonna hit on an immediate pain point for them, which is exactly what you're looking to do with your outreach anyway, right? Is to find that pain point. It's getting you several steps ahead in the sales journey without ever having to make that first phone call. And right off the rip, you can say, hey, I know you're having a pain point here. I can potentially assist. And even if you can't assist, that's fantastic. You're getting a response and getting a yes or a no, and figuring out whether or not that they're a viable shipping partner for you, short-term or long-term, regardless.
Yeah, and that's another important aspect, right? It's become more popular, and it's become more mainstream to talk about ideal customer persona, right? And that is so important. And so it's Will Jenkins does a good job of focusing on that, right? I think Kara Brown talks about this a lot too, but you can't do everything for everybody as a brokerage. It's not the reality of the situation. And so to know where your strengths are, and then to be able to embed intent data into those areas and focus your searches on where your strong suits are, is a superpower, right? If you just solely focus on that, you're going to find a lot of customers that you really can help, that you can build long-lasting relationships with, that you can keep through up markets and down markets, right? So to narrow that down, find your areas of expertise, and then find those shippers who need that, is what I think we can really help with.
Now, I want to touch on the broker profiles a little bit too, because I think that those are really interesting, because it kind of leads towards what we talked about a lot the last time, was just the need for the carrier side of things. But I think that there is a really a big demand and a big need for carrier reviews, carrier profiles to be set up so that carriers can leave those both positive and negative reviews, which I think we'll start to see you. And I could be totally right or wrong. We'll talk about this on the next show we do. I'm expecting from those reviews, you'll probably have a different mix of like maybe 50-50 good to bad reviews, especially to start. And then I think you'll start to see a lot of the good brokers really hammer hard using this and using it to have their good capacity, review them in a positive way, help shine good lights on what they're doing, because I think that this is a good tool. Like just what you said, you're having a lot of shippers who are looking at this. So this could also be a good leverage point for brokers to say, hey, we are very highly reviewed within our carrier networks. Our carriers really trust us and really like us. We're higher. We pay them really quickly. We're higher than the normal, days to pay. So I think it's a really added bonus for brokers as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that's always been our mission, right? To help the good folks shine. And, I mentioned everybody says we provide the highest level of service when they're going to their shippers, right? Well, now those folks can prove it, right? Through third-party verified reviews from their shippers. And at the same time, everybody posts on their website that, we treat our carriers like they're our customers. Well, now those folks that really do, again, will stand out. Like you said, they'll get good reviews from their capacity. They will, it will become very clear, right, who actually treats their carriers really well and I think who doesn't. I mentioned we got our first 2 reviews. They came in organically. They were not very positive reviews. But I think, as folks begin to pay attention, right, that narrative will shift a little bit. It's easy to not have a review strategy, but if you do that, then the organic ones are the ones that are going to come in. And usually folks are only leaving reviews on their own accord if they had a incredibly outstanding experience or if they had a not good experience, right?
Yes.
So I totally agree with you. The good folks are really going to stand out, and if we can help people raise the bar a bit, right, and provide a little bit of accountability. I don't want to just be an agent of change, right? I want to help folks grow their businesses and whatever else. But if there is some level of accountability that we can provide on top of it, great.
Yeah, and I think that very quickly brokers are going to realize, hey, this is not just another DAT review board. This is a serious platform that is literally just for this. And I think they're going to really have to step up. Brokers are going to have to really step up their game. Going back to Dan's mission, brokers and carriers alike are going to have to really start treating each other like customers. And this is definitely something that like you said, it holds them accountable. If they're actually doing these things, these actions, it really can shine through to say, hey, if you've got several carriers or a lot of carriers who are always reviewing you or a new carrier always reviewing you once a week or whatever it may be, that's going to really shine through and say, hey, this brokerage is actually walking the walk. They're talking the talk. They're getting new carrier reviews. They're not, horrible reviews. They're very positive reviews. They're, 4-star and up reviews. And I think that's really going to help change the conversation and we kind of weed out some of these really bad brokers and brokerages overall.
Yeah, especially for things like, like you mentioned, time to pay or not paying or that even one unpaid load for an owner operator is an absolute killer, especially in this market, right? Like that's make or break for them.
Yeah.
And so if they can avoid that based off of, a review from a peer who unfortunately went through a similar situation, right? Like that's amazing if we could provide that. And don't get me wrong, like most of the mid-sized, bigger brokerages, they do a good job for the most part of treating their carriers pretty well.
Yeah.
I think it's some of those smaller folks that you're uncertain of, right? That maybe we can help some carriers avoid the shady ones or the ones who don't treat their carriers super well. So,
yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm really excited about it, right? Like I said, it's been a long requested feature from the carrier side, and now to give them a little bit more of a voice in the industry, I think is going to be a great thing overall.
And these are still like fully verified reviews and going through that process as well, correct?
Yeah, we ask for very similar things, right? If they've got first we have to verify them as a user. But then, too, if they've got proof of the load, whether that's a redacted rate confirmation, email correspondence, something that proves that they worked with them, right? And we still run it through a human being, right? We read every review that comes in for quality purposes as well, too, right? So if we think it's not useful to anybody else, we'll just never approve that. It'll get never be published in the first place.
Yeah, there's just some reviews, and I think we've all seen them on certain platforms where in our personal life, our normal consumer life, in our freight life, that that review probably should have never been posted. It's wild. It's out there. There's just not a lot of context, no real information there. It's just kind of a bashing session and doesn't really help anything at all. So I love that you guys are still verifying on that side and making sure that they're going through that same kind of stringent process to make sure that they are, legitimate reviews.
Yeah, we know that the review integrity is our business at this point, right? Like that data is crucial to what we do, and so we take that part very seriously.
What do you, as we start to wrap here, Rob, what are you most bullish on for the rest of the year? We just got we're recording this on July 2nd, where we just got into the second half of the year. What are you most bullish on?
I'm bullish that morale is going to pick up a little bit. That's what I'm bullish on. I think, I've been talking to folks the last couple of weeks, and people seem a little like they've had a little boost to their overall morale. Folks are a little cheerier. Yeah. I don't know if it's just the summer, but I think a lot of it is that the market has reset, and folks have been forced to reset, right? And a lot of the tough decisions that they had to make, right? The recalibration in terms of assets, drivers, headcount, where their expenses have gone, the good businesses have reset, and now I think there's opportunity to move forward, and try to make a little money even at this kind of new low rate that we've been bouncing on for however long. And I know we've seen a slight uptick, which could be seasonality, maybe it's not, but at the very least, I think the good businesses that have made the moves are feeling a little bit safer. Don't get me wrong. I still think there'll probably be some fallout to come, and
absolutely
a bit of a reckoning for the folks who haven't done that reset. But I'm bullish that morale is going to improve over the next 6 months. That's what I'm most bullish on.
I'm hopeful in that as well, man. I like I said, I was at Texas Trucking Show this past weekend, and I tend to agree. I think that morale, the overall bullishness of the industry seems up. It doesn't seem like where it was in January or even this time last year. People are getting more excited. There seems to be a lot more excitement around tech, a lot more excitement around those kind of things that there just hasn't been the last 18 months just because of how bad the market has been. But we're starting to see kind of some of those changes. People are a little bit happier. Like you said, maybe a summer being here finally, but no matter what, we'll take it, and we'll continue to kind of send some good vibes throughout the markets, and hopefully we can have some good changes. I want to ask one more thing. What are you guys attending any more conferences this year to kind of round out the year? So if anyone wants to come see you guys, meet you in person, they can have that opportunity.
Yeah. So we talked about the Broker Carrier Summit. We will be there in Fort Worth this fall, which I'm very excited about. We are sponsoring that event. We are going to, I believe we'll be at F3 as well. See some folks there, and I think it's possible we might go to some user conferences, right, of some technology platforms. we're always trying to find places where brokers are, where carriers are, right, to try to get in front of them. But yeah, the one I think I'm most excited about right now is definitely the Broker Carrier Summit. I think that's we're excited to go back there.
Yeah, I think that's going to be such a tremendous event. It's such a growing event. I think that this is going to be probably the biggest one yet to date, and I think that carriers and brokers are really bullish on just meeting each other face to face and kind of having some of these opportunities, to just kind of network and figure out how they can kind of partner up and just kind of change or help the industry a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rob, I appreciate you coming back on the show and talking about CarrierSource and what's new. If the audience wants to get in touch or they want to find a little bit more, if you guys don't know about CarrierSource by now, they are a sponsor of our podcast and our newsletter. So I don't know what you guys are doing. You're living under a rock, but if they want to learn more, if they want to get in touch with you guys, how can they find you guys online?
Yeah, you can go to CarrierSource.io. It's an open and free resource for everybody to come in and utilize. You can always reach out to me directly on LinkedIn under Robert Light, or my email is just rob@CarrierSource.io. I'm always available.
I love it. We'll have all the links in the comments. If you guys want to reach out to Rob or to CarrierSource and to learn a little bit more, make sure you do that. If you guys like today's show, make sure you give it a like or a review, depending on the platform. That helps us out a ton. And we do drop newsletters every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at ThinkFreight.io. And we'll catch you guys in the next episode. And don't forget to think freight.